Oh, very cool.
Mhm.
I mean, did you ever get a chance to talk to him or anything like that?
Unfortunately, at that time, I wasn't doing graphing or anything, which by graphing I mean like collecting autographs, so I didn't get to meet him. I know some people that did get to meet him and got his autograph and got to talk with him and stuff, but unfortunately I was never one at that time to go out and do the graphing. I was just one of your typical fans, go to the show, watch some wrestling and go home. I didn't know about going to the loading docks and meeting people when they were coming in or leaving or going to the airports or going to the hotel back then. So, no, I didn't get a chance to, unfortunately.
No, I mean, he really did have a pretty impressive career. I mean, you look at all the people that he wrestled. I mean, there's some very common legendary names on there. Well, legendary to some, but like guys like Raven and Sabu and stuff like that. And then you just see other guys that are still coming up in the business, like Bryan Danielson, and he wrestled Joey Matthews. Just
Cody
a
Rhodes.
lot. Yeah, right. Just a lot of various different guys. I mean, he was the best way to describe his career, in my opinion, is simply he was the guy who was intertwined. He was practically destined to become something bigger. I mean, he was a Shawn Michaels student, his first, if I recall correctly. Which, well, I think it's one of his first. I think his first might have been somebody else. I might be off on that, but I don't want to sit there and make that mistake. But one of his first students, and I mean, obviously being trained by Shawn at the time, I mean, Shawn has also produced guys like Bryan Danielson. So, I mean, to have that kind of legacy behind you is a hell of a kickstart into the wrestling business. And then for him to get matches, obviously with Heatland, obviously him getting put through OVW and stuff like that, and obviously getting his time in WWE, he was the guy who was constantly involved in major angles, but from a secondary point. When the Hardy Boys made their secondary comeback and they had the titles and everything else like that, I mean, it was a mini feud, but there was, Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch, For the most part, he's a guy that should have really ended up being on TV. He should have become on the level, on par with guys like, DiBiase or even Randy Orton to some extent, I don't know if it wasn't that he wasn't given the proper amount of chances. I think they just didn't find his exact niche in the WWE. I mean, obviously when he came out with Trevor Murdoch, when they formed that tag team, that technically they pulled a Dusty Rhodes on him. I mean, the only reason that they existed was a joke on TNA's America's Most Wanted. Basically WWE wanted to use somebody to go out there and, pretty much be the established WWE version of America's Most Wanted. And, they picked Lance Cade, who they obviously changed the name of Lance Cade out from Garrison when he first came in there during the invasion. And they changed him to Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch, and they had a good series of matches with that, and they got over. People really liked seeing Trevor Murdoch and Lance Cade on screen, Good heels, country boys, it worked. There hasn't been too many country boys really running through WWE in the last decade, I mean, gosh, trying to think of the last technically hillbilly character, and that would be Jimmy Wang Yang, so, oof. But, yeah, I mean, in reality, he had so much to offer. I mean, it really is a shame. It's a shame because he was only 29. Obviously when WWE is pushing guys like Batista when he first gets in there at an older age, because he was wrestling down in DSW forever. Oh, was it DSW or was it UPW or something like that for forever underneath Leviathan? And he was an older guy, and he became top of the company there for a while, and I always thought that, younger guys, they always complain about not getting their shot, like in shoot interviews and stuff like that. They always complain about not having a chance. And, well, Lance had all the chances in the world. I mean, he was definitely he was definitely able to become something great. I saw in the next 5 years or so. And obviously his career and his life was robbed short due to complications, and I don't even know if still, I know when we did the pre-records, it's pretty much the answer that we've gotten from, the state is that it was heart complications, but nobody's actually revealed anything with that, and that's fine. But I mean, regardless of the fact, you know, it isn't a secret that he did go to rehab a couple times, and I mean, we have to at least address that fact. But I mean, it's different. I have a little more respect for a guy that goes into rehab on their own, as opposed to somebody that's, I mean, told just to go to rehab. And Lance Cade, I think the very last time he really wanted to make something more of his career, from what I remember, is he actually took the initiative to apply himself to rehab because he wanted to fix himself and he really wanted to get his life right. I mean, you know, he's survived by his wife and 2 kids. You know, it really is a sad story. It's a story that pretty much ends instead of happily ever after. It's a story that ends with what if, you know. So.
Yeah. Now, here's an interesting fact that I was actually just looking up. Actually, he formed a tag team in HWA and won the HWA tag team titles 3 times with another wrestler who passed before his time, being Steve Bradley.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No problem.
No, but yeah, Steve Bradley. I mean, our Haas. You know, he worked with our Haas too. He had a couple matches with him. I mean, there's a lot of people that he actually bumped elbows with, you know, that are unfortunately passed on. I was actually looking at the list, and there was more than a few. And in all reality, what that really goes back to, he had a match with Chris Candido. So, you know, I mean, it really all goes back to the wrestling industry, and a lot of the wrestlers need to take care of themselves. You know, I know it's hard to sit there and say, everybody can sit there and say it over and over and over again, but, you know, there's just no, how do you spin it? How do you sit there and look at somebody that's passed away at 29 years old and think, you know, he lived a good life, you know, and he did. Don't get me wrong. He had a heck of a career for what he had, but it should have been a lot more. And that's what I mean is we're robbed as fans, you know, and maybe that sounds a little selfish of me. That's not what I'm trying to convey, but it's kind of like I would have rather have seen Lance Cade go somewhere, become world champion, you know, have a T-shirt put out, be loved by millions of fans, look back on his career when he's 40, and probably when I would be 60. No, not that old. I actually he's only a couple of years older than me, whatever, or younger, sorry. But yeah, it's just it's odd, you know. I mean, and that's just with all wrestlers. I mean, there's just so many different wrestlers. I mean, we lost 3 wrestlers within the last 2 weeks, JT? You know?
Yeah, we've lost 3 pretty much, and it's pretty sad. I mean, honestly, and I hate to say it this way because it sounds really bad, but if you think about it, it's just kind of a yearly thing. You'll go for a month or 2 without any, and then all of a sudden shit just hits the fan at like 3, 4, 5, 6, you know, at a time.
Right. Yeah, in 3s, man. That's what they say. That's become the locker room myth or whatever, is in 3s. And it's you know, sadly it's kind of the truth. You know, tragedy happens in 3s, and unfortunately Lance Cade is one of those tragedies. But you know, I mean, he did have a good career. He did leave a lot of people with, you know, memories and stuff like that. And I think ultimately, you know, his legacy is going to be kind of a what if, you know, in my opinion. I mean, he's had great matches. Obviously, he worked in FMW, he's worked in Heartland, he's worked in WWE and OVW and everywhere else. And I think it's more tragic just because it's going to be one of those careers like, oh, do you remember that? You know, I mean, and this is how somebody would say it. I'm not saying it because I'm trying to be derogatory, but to be like, oh, do you remember that cowboy or that hillbilly tag team in WWE? Yeah, what happened to them? Oh, well, you know, he passed away. It's like it's brutal, you know. I mean, I'm not trying to be derogatory. I'm just trying to be a little honest here, and you know, it's just my thoughts on it. You know, I mean, I don't know, JT.
You know, and as a wrestler, even if you don't know the person, this is just me because of me being a worker. You know, it hits me harder than it probably hits a lot of fans. I mean, a lot of fans watch this guy on TV and watched him come up, but from a worker standpoint, it just hits harder because you're just sitting here going, man, that could be me one day. And, you know, it really sucks. And it sounds selfish, but, you know, we're all out there and we're all putting our bodies on the line. And, yeah, you know, some of us get mixed up in the wrong stuff at the wrong times, but, you know, it kind of comes with the territory. And, you know, it just sucks that we lost another good wrestler. I mean, 29 years old, he still had another 15, 20 years in his body that he could go in the ring. I mean, he was still, and I hate to say this because he's been in the business a while, but in my opinion, he was still wet behind the ears because if you look at his age, he was in the business from, 98, 99 until 2010, okay? So 10 or 11 years. So he's not green, but in my opinion, he's still wet behind the ears because of his age. He could have gone another 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, easily. I mean, seriously, he was trained in 98. He debuted in 99. I mean, jeez, that's the start of everything. I mean, you know, and he had a hell of a good run. I mean, especially for being so young in his own career. You know, I mean, who knows what he would have been like in another 5 more years. That's what I'm saying, you know. He could have been the next Randy Orton in another 5 years. You know, he could have been something better in another 10 years. You know, I mean, I really think he's one of those guys that would have definitely made something different in the WWE. I think he would have definitely made a large imprint on a lot of fans. You know, so.
Yeah, I agree completely. You know, and honestly, here's my whole thing is, you know, I'm sorry, you know, but I wish he hadn't gone. And, you know, it's selfish to say, but I'd rather see a guy, you know, pass of natural causes than somebody die because of complications, because of a heart attack or, you know, any reasons beyond that. I'd rather see a guy go because, you know, they lived their life to their fullest than somebody go before they were ready.
Oh, everybody does. You know, I mean, it's easier to let go. It's easier to make sense of and understand when someone completes their life cycle, when somebody lives to a ripe old age of whatever it may be, 60, 70, 80, you know, when somebody lives long, you know, that kind of time. It's hard to understand, especially when we're in the age group, but it's hard to understand. It's hard to make sense of somebody passing away because of things like complications and everything else at the age of 29. You know, I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It's hard to accept any young man's death. You know, I mean, so many problems with that, you know, as it is, and obviously, you know, it goes back to there's so many problems with, you know, the wrestlers getting a union or insurance or anything else like that. And I'm not really trying to sidetrack to that, but I mean, he was released from the hospital a couple of days, or I think it was like literally a day, you know, before he passed. And you'd think that the hospital would have noticed this, but, you know, it just, so many questions come up. You know, I mean, if Cade was 80 years old and this happened, nobody would have thought second about it. Nobody would have been like, well, did the hospital screw up? You know, what were these complications, et cetera? They would be like, no, he was 80 years old. He's lived a long, solid life. He's given his mark to the business. We will remember him for it. You know, here you have a student of Shawn Michaels. You know, here you have a guy that was pushed not once but twice in the WWE and was getting ready for a third run and had a lot of opportunity and chance to really get in there and become something, even though he was so young in his career. And, yeah, it was Rob Short. And there's just so many questions left, you know, so.
I agree. And, you know, honestly, we just got a couple more minutes remaining. We are going to be doing a Skandar Akbar tribute radio show. You know, here's the whole thing with that, of course, you know. With that, you know, he actually passed in his 70s, so he lived a full life. But, you know, this is dedicated to Lance Cade here today. You've heard from Les Thatcher as well as Pete Gass. And, you know, with that just being said, I just want to say, you know, as a wrestler and a wrestling fan, it sucks to see Lance go. And, you know, hopefully I'll be in that ring in the sky one day with him.
Hope so too, man.
So, you know, other than that, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in, and I think we just need to go ahead and give him his proper send-off. What do you think?
Yep, that works.